Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
The wages of sin is gonorrhea, syphilis, and death.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast. On this episode, my weird dad and his friends will be talking about...
This is where the worst begins. The work of madness. Death! Of insane murder and lingering death. Deranged. For Mary, it was only the beginning. For Christine, it was already too late. For Dolly, the worst was yet to come. And only Mrs. Cobb knew what he would do next. Sometimes a story you don't want to believe is true. Crimes so brutal that the newspapers refuse to print their terrifying details. When the horror becomes unbearable, it is too late to scream. Deranged, rated R.
Hello and welcome to Wake Up Heavy. This is your host, Mark Bigley. Joining me once again from the Projection Booth podcast is Mike White.
Hello.
And rounding out hosting duties this time from the Culture Cast is Chris Stachiw.
I put the file in Necrophile. I don't put the necro in Necrophile. I put the file in Necro.
I put the Necco in Necco wafer.
Yeah, boy. No, I don't think anybody even eats those anymore, Mike.
Oh. I know people that eat those.
Oh, dear God. Oh, dear God.
This is the second of 3 episodes on the early horror films of Alan Ormsby and Bob Clark. Today we will be discussing the 1974 film Deranged, Confessions of a Necrophile, a very faithful telling of the Ed Gein story. Ormsby wrote the script and co-directed the film with Jeff Gillen, an Ormsby Clark regular, with Bob Clark acting as an uncredited producer. As with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and Death Dream, Ormsby also supplied much of the special makeup effects, this time with help from a young up-and-comer named Tom Savini. Roberts Blossom plays Ezra Cobb, a middle-aged Midwesterner who has been sheltered and coddled by his domineering religious zealot of a mother. When she dies, Ezra is left to his own warped devices and starts to lose what little he had left of his sanity. This leads Ezra to grave robbing, morbid arts and crafts, and ultimately murder. With Clark regulars Leslie Carlson as an intrepid news correspondent, and Marion Waldman as a potential love interest for Ezra. We will be spoiling the film, so if you haven't seen it and you can stomach it, give it a watch and then come back to the episode. So I'm pretty sure this was a first-time watch for both of you. So Mike, what did you think?
Well, I wasn't sure how much I was supposed to be laughing as I was watching it. I was definitely laughing every time the very serious narrator of the story would show up, because he would literally inject himself into the story, which was really great. I love Roberts Blossom. So I was actually very excited to see this because anytime to see him, I'm there for it. No matter how big or how small his role is. This might be the youngest I've ever seen him, which is 50 years old. I was just figuring out how old he was to star in this. He's at 50. I hope I look better at 50 than Robert Blossom did, because he just always looks so old.
He's got that Abe Vigoda thing going on.
Yeah, he does.
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even in, I want to say Citizens Band is just like a couple years later, and he's, the old man in the story. He's Paul Amat's father, and he is ancient and okay, but it was great seeing him. Some of the gross out humor was like, okay. And then towards the end of the story, I was just like, man, this is going on for a little long. But otherwise, I had a good time.
And Chris, as a true crime aficionado, what were your feelings on this version of the Ed Gein story?
As someone who does have their own true crime paranormal podcast, like you said, Mark, I should know the Ed Gein story. And I do. I mean, I think most people know the Ed Gein story at this point, at least what one could say the bigger points, the larger overtures of the story. Man is a mama's boy, is coddled by his mom, and his mom dies and he loses his mind. I mean, that's the story beats. I mean, that's the story beats here. That's the story beats in Texas Chainsaw in a lot of ways. That's the beats of fucking Psycho, for God's sakes. I mean, again, the Ed Gein story, the amount of stories that it has influenced is more than just you can count on two hands, and a lot of them are things that are very well-known pop culture-y, like Texas Chainsaw, obviously. But man, this movie, on the other hand, deserves to be in that conversation more so than I would say almost any of those other movies, because it is a more faithful adaptation of the story. It goes off the rails. I mean, like you said, Mike, it is way too long. It's 10 minutes too long. It is a movie that, like you said, Mark, it has a lot of gross out humor, a lot of gross out arts and crafts projects. But again, that was Ed Gein. I mean, that was the Ed Gein thing, is the use of human body parts, corpses, skin to fucking make belts and lampshades, nipple belts. I think that's one of the great ones. And the human skin lampshade is another one. To your point, Mike, I mean, Robert's Blossom, I've only ever seen him in Twilight Zone, where he looked fucking ancient. Seeing him now, like we were talking about before, the Abe Vigoda thing, he looks like Abe Vigoda. I mean, Abe Vigoda looks the same at Barney Miller as he did in the 90s or the 2000s.
Now, you've seen him before. You've seen Home Alone.
I've never seen Home Alone. So.
Really? Neither have I. I've never actually watched it all the way through, but I just know he was the old man in that. How about Christine?
No.
Wow, that's another good one.
Yeah. So this is like the first, I mean, obviously this is like the biggest starring leading ever role he ever got. I would say that there's probably a reason for that, given what the movie is. I mean, again, you don't make this movie expecting that you're going to be in the next fucking Star Wars. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that you brought this film to my attention, Mark, because it's not something I would have seen otherwise, because it's hard to find.
It took me a while to see it. This is, again, like Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and Death Dream and Black Christmas, a movie that I discovered because of the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film. And anytime I saw Bob Clark's name associated with a film, it always caught me as odd because I only knew him from A Christmas Story. This would have been in the late 80s. A Christmas Story had become a staple on TV. Not the 24-hour thing yet, but that was going to happen soon. I always loved A Christmas Story. It struck me as odd that this person had made all these horror films. I don't know if they were just under different titles or just very hard to find VHS releases. This may have been the only one that was actually on video store shelves. It was the cover, though, that kept me from renting it, because we've got the picture of poor Sally Mae trussed up like a deer. I wasn't into that sort of horror, like the realistic, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I don't think I saw until I was in my 20s. Once I came back around to horror, 8 or so years ago, this went back on my lists, and it just wasn't streaming anywhere. And I don't know if the Blu-ray releases had even been put out yet. I know Arrow did one. maybe around that time, but I wouldn't have known anything about it. And then Kino Lorber did one a couple years after that.
Good old Kino.
And I don't think it's one that I would buy on Blu-ray, to be honest with you.
Well, if memory serves, this wasn't even available on VHS for a lot of years. I seem to remember when it made a big splash. Gosh, I want to say like 2001 or 2002. It was like it had almost been like a missing film. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's a huge full page ad in like Shock Cinema. Like now it's rediscovered and here's this movie that you haven't heard of. And this is the true Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all this. So I just, I waited another 20 years and then I finally watched it.
It was part of MGM's Midnight Movies thing.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah. That and Motel Hell was the double feature on that DVD. I remember those. Those are pretty good DVDs. Those Midnight Movie DVDs series that MGM did with some good stuff. I mean, this movie obviously included. Again, it has the sensational part, the Ed Gein story, but it ultimately is a character piece. Like at its heart, at its deep, disgusting core, it is a movie about a man unable to cope with reality. Where have we heard that story before?
Which I think was odd for the time. Because if you take a look at some of the other Gein-inspired films, they don't focus on the Gein character. So in Psycho, we shift to that character halfway through, but it's pretty far removed from this. And when I was doing my reading the other day, Block even said that he wasn't inspired by Gein. This was more of a coincidence.
Right.
He was getting ready to turn in the draft, and this all came to light around the same time. And so he threw something in at the end about, that referenced Gein or something like that. Take all that with a grain of salt.
That sounds like horse shit to me, but that's just me. That sounds like it's like a big pile of horse shit. I mean, look, it's too similar to be a coincidence. Like, it's just, I'm sorry he didn't come up with the original idea of a guy who kills people because his mom died, but
I haven't read the novel, just the Bates Motel and stuff like that, where it's either implied or explicit that he killed his mom. We're not into that. Gein didn't kill his mom, didn't even dig up his mom like most of the stories show. Usually the focus isn't on him. He is a side character. Even when you look at something like Silence of the Lambs, this is about the investigation. It's not about, it would be a totally different movie if it was about Buffalo Bill the whole time. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start to get into that kind of icky, dread-drenched stuff. Watching it this time, I kind of felt a little ickier than I had in the previous viewings. That's just more my age and seeing things a little differently now, and where you almost wish that he wasn't the focus and it was more like Silence or even Psycho or Texas Chainsaw. You need a little more space from the icky stuff.
To your point about Ormsby and the story being similar, the two women that Ed Gein did kill, because Ed Gein's only had confirmed two people, a tavern owner and a hardware store owner. They have to make these stories a lot more exciting because it's just not that fucking exciting. It's just not. Like, Ed Gein's story, other than the fact that he exhumed bodies and turned them into furniture, he just killed two women. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay killing women.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. But in the grand scope of people whose stories attract attention in the true crime world, his wouldn't, other than the fact that he was a grave robber.
If he was just a grave robber, it wouldn't be as sensational, but he made stuff with the body parts and made some weird shit. You get bits and pieces of that in this, and even not really as much as you say get in Texas Chainsaw, where there's close-ups of a face that's been turned into a light shade and some of the other things. But you'll see little there at one point, I think, when he has kidnapped the waitress from the bar, there's like a full arm just nailed to the wall behind him, and it's, maybe not handled as interestingly as Texas Chainsaw or something. As far as the story itself, it's very, very true to what really went on, and I think that's where it stands out again versus the other ones where they just took little bits and pieces and mixed in other things. Buffalo Bill's got Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper and all these other influences. And Leatherface, really, the only thing is that he dabbles in arts and crafts as well and wears the mask.
If my memory is incorrect, correct me, but I don't even remember if Ed Gein ate people. I don't think there was ever any cannibalism in the Ed Gein story, right?
I don't think so, no. I think he might have been called that, but I don't think that they ever proved that he was a cannibal. I know they called him the Butcher of Plainfield, and there are a lot of other titles.
Great nickname, by the way. My God. The Plainfield Ghoul.
Yeah. God. Well, yeah, and Ghoul also helps imply that there was some eating going on, too, but...
Yeah. Ghouls being creatures that feed off of corpses.
Exactly.
So, yeah. You know, I think the Ed Gein story for me is just a fucking sad story of a man with mental illness who had no idea how to handle grief and loss.
Right.
Or the outside world.
Or anything other than, he was so isolated and so protected by his mother that he was completely socially inept to a dangerous degree. In this case, the story of Ed Gein in reality and the film.
From what I understand, his crimes took place over a 3-year period. So really, he spiraled pretty quickly. He really lost all touch with reality once his mom passed away.
I mean, Ed Gein was found legally insane and put in a mental institution. He was being treated for mental illness. The sad thing about this movie is, in a lot of ways, just like Texas Chainsaw, trivialize how shitty what actually happened was. But I think, to your point, Mark, this movie does a better job making the audience uncomfortable with the reality of it. And I think that that's the biggest success of this movie is Texas Chainsaw is an icky movie, but this movie is icky in a way that Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is. It feels too real. It's cinema verite. It's not even a film. It's almost a documentary. I mean, this film feels like a documentary, right?
Well, it's shot like a documentary. Like I was saying with the narrator busting in, I love when there's a shot, I think it's in Ed's mother's bedroom, and then the camera pans to the left, and there's the narrator outside the bedroom. That was pretty cool. I have to say, when he sits down, the narrator just walks in and sits down in front of the camera while stuff was happening in the background. It's like, okay, that's a little much. I mean, but it's the thing. It's the thing from the movie. It's like their way of telling the story. So I was like, all right, this is okay. It did make me laugh out loud a few times when they would go back to the narrator or he would inject himself into the story. It was a little Abram Zucker type of thing, or Zucker. I was just like, okay, we're crossing into parody lines a few times, but I really have to say, man, Robert Blossom, he brings it so well in this movie. There's a scene when they're talking to him about dating, and I'm using this from the movie, dating the fat girl or the fat woman.
Mike, I'm using this from the film. Please don't jump over me.
Yeah.
She's a big heifer.
Maureen's the only woman I ever did trust. She's fat, that's why. A big heifer.
She's a big girl is what I have.
Right. Is she about a size 14? He's got like these looks on his face. He's like ticks. It's like he's kind of chewing the inside of his mouth. He makes his face look really weird, and then he'll go back to normal, and then he'll do it again. And it's like you can see that monster that's inside of him, and just this kind of like conflict that is going on while he's hearing about these things. I just thought that it was a great performance, and that he doesn't really ever become a monster. He always believes very sincerely in what he's doing.
He's as much of a monster in this as he is in The Burning Man, Mike. You remember that episode of The Twilight Zone?
I
85?
do.
That's like the only other thing I had seen him in. Mark, I don't know if you've seen it, but he plays like a very strange, evil villain that just kind of comes out of nowhere, injects himself into these two people's lives and destroys their lives.
Yeah.
With no reasoning, with no interpretation, no reason given why as to why this old man is just walking down the side of the road. But it's very much similar to this, where it's like, he's just an old guy until you realize that he's like skinning a woman alive in his fucking barn.
Right.
Those nervous tics and the constantly pursing his lips and sticking his bottom lip out. And at first I kind of thought, is this just him, or this is the portrayal? And it helped me to see it comes and goes, and so you're seeing this struggle when it's not being explicitly narrated. Like the narrator will come in and give you a lot of this exposition, but his facial expressions give you even more of that, and it's a little bit more powerful. That whole news reporter bit, I remember before I watched this, I read a couple reviews, and I was like, oh, I'm going to hate this movie because that sounds like goofy as shit. And, you know, me and horror comedies, I think I don't like them, but I bought that so hard from the first time I watched it. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I love Leslie Carlson for one thing. I love it when he shows up and stuff.
So much Leslie Carlson.
When it opens on him, and it almost seems like he just about broke a couple of times. Like you could sort of see a smile coming across his face. Like he's going, okay, I'm supposed to be reading this seriously, but I can't. I'm having a hard time doing that. For me, it became a little bit of a relief of what was going on in the scene. It's not necessarily comic relief, but in a way it is. It's super dark humor all the way through. It gives you that distance that you need, since this is just all focused on Ezra, who does yucky shit for most of the movie. I was happy to see him pop up and kind of give me a chance to go take a breath and not have to deal with what I knew was going to happen in the film.
I mean, it speaks to the idea in horror or other genre films, like some directors don't think you need a release valve.
Right.
In this film's case, it helps because, like you said, Mark, the proximity to the terrible things that are going on is so close that this movie would be pretty goddamn unwatchable I think it would be unwatchable without Leslie Carlson. It would be too goddamn dark for its own good.
Which is why I didn't watch the Steve Railsback Ed Gein movie. I considered it because everything that I've read said that it's very close to the real story too. And I thought, well, these are the only two that kind of stick to that story. But knowing that it didn't have comic relief, I was like, nah, I don't think I want to.
I don't know if I was supposed to be laughing when he like popped out the corpse's eyeballs and then sawed off the head and was scooping out the brains. I found that to be hilarious just because it looks so cheap. It just kind of reminded me of like a 3 on a meat hook, or, you know, some of these like other gore type films where it's
Evil Dead.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Evil Dead's effects are a little bit better than that, but I do have to say that the look of the corpses was really cool. Like when we see, and I did like how when he opens up his mother's grave, how in his mind she looks perfect. And then eventually he realizes once he pulls her hand off that she has rotted, and then we get to see what she really looks like. Okay, that's pretty cool. And I liked how he was just tormented by her throughout so much of it, even when he is having a nice moment with a girl, and then suddenly she crops back up in his brain and starts talking about all the venereal diseases that he's going to catch by being with this woman.
The wages of sin is gonorrhea, syphilis, and death.
Again, I don't think any of us can definitively say that's what Ed Gein was going through, but he was found mentally unstable, and so he may have been seeing visions. It would make sense. The guy was obsessed with his mom. He would look around and see his mom everywhere.
Yeah. I think he was lost without his mom.
Yeah.
You get that in this, and I forgot that there was not only the reporter's narration, but also we get her voice in a lot of scenes. And I really liked that one part fairly early on, shortly after she's passed away, or I guess a year has passed, as the reporter says, and he's laying in his bed. And then the camera just does basically a 360 around the room to show you we're getting inside his head by looking at his living situation. Her voiceover comes in, and then we get back to Ezra, and he's mouthing the words, but it's her voice, and you're just like, oh, shit. And that was really effective for me this time.
That was nice. Yeah.
So there's little neat things like that throughout the film. I think that comparing it maybe to some of the other Ormsby and Clark productions, there aren't as many of those touches in this. It's a little more straightforward. This had a way bigger budget than Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, but you almost can't tell. And maybe it's because it's a smaller cast and focused mainly on one person. But I think you can tell that Bob Clark was definitely not directing this one. There are some neat touches, but mostly it's pretty flat and basic composition and structure to the shots and the scenes and editing.
It's very naturalistic.
Very naturalistic, which of course adds to that whole thing.
I don't characterize Bob Clark as naturalistic.
No, he's very stylized.
This is hyper naturalistic. It is intentionally naturalistic, even as far as to say it's not like, oh, they just did it by accident. It's like, again, when you have the introduction of a character that Leslie Carlson plays, it's going to have to be that. There's almost no choice. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it be super stylized and then fucking guy walks in from off screen that's supposed to just be a real person. It's like, that just doesn't work. The movie benefits from having the narrator, but it does not benefit from being so naturalistic in a way. I would have preferred a little bit of stylization in some respect.
Well, I always like style in movies. I mean, you don't have to go crazy.
Yeah. There's almost none here.
Yeah, to your point, it does feel very documentary-esque when it comes to that. It does feel like this is just a slice of life, which makes the horror even, it hits harder.
Because nobody could imagine that little Ezra Cobb is, murdering women down at his shack, but
he's kind of a weird guy for his neighbors. They're just like, what the hell is this guy talking about at one point?
You said she was at your house? Yeah, she was.
That scene about the obituaries, just
yeah,
humor in those scenes with the neighbors is a nice relief too, because we're not laughing at the expense of victims or crimes or anything like that. Like you said, Mike, they just see him as a goofy guy, and he finds out about obituaries and how helpful that information could be.
Yeah.
He basically blows his cover 2 or 3 different times in the film. Once with them, one of the sons asked, "What are you going to do, dig him up?"
You mean I can find out where and when somebody been buried? On the very same day? This here could be real valuable information.
Why? What are you planning to do? Dig them up or something?
No, sir. Wouldn't have to dig it all up.
And then when he gets pulled over, after he has dug up his mom, he starts to confess that he's just dug up his mom. And then he'll stop, though, and course correct, and the lies come in. I thought that was a nice touch, too. Given, this isn't just the goofy guy. He does understand, to some extent, what he's doing and that it's wrong. Whether those things happen that way or not, I like to give credit to Ormsby for writing it that way, that, hold on, let's not excuse him too much here. He is doing awful things and knows, at least in the back of his mind, that they're awful.
He might be classifiably mentally insane, but he's not completely mentally gone.
Mm-hmm.
Still knows what he's doing in some respects. And if he's hiding it, he knows it's wrong. Though I guess you could make the case that he admits it so many times, he doesn't even realize what he's doing is wrong. It's just matter of fact. Like Mike said, slice of life.
I'm really curious now to see another Ormsby film called The Great Masquerade, which also came out in 1974, which also has Robert's Blossom in it, which is about a fashion show on, in order to infiltrate a gang of drug smugglers, a cop is sent undercover to participate in a drag queen beauty contest aboard a cruise ship. That sounds right up my alley. It is also known as Murder on the Emerald Seas.
Yeah, I think this is one that he's kind of disassociated himself from.
Yeah.
From the reading that I've done.
I think I tried to ask him about it, and he was just like, nope, don't ask me about that one. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's got Robert's Blossom. It's got Ormsby's ex-wife, who was in a bunch of their other films.
It's got Henny Youngman and Johnny Weissmuller.
It's kind of curious, though, when talking about this little group, like we're doing for these shows, that no one makes a cameo on this one. Bob Clark doesn't show up. Jeff Gillen doesn't show up. I guess Ormsby is the picture of Maureen Selby's dead husband. He's obviously done up in makeup, which doesn't surprise me because he was a makeup guy. I read that and I thought, I had to rewind it, and I was like, that doesn't look like what he looked like back then.
Right.
But you can kind of see it in the eyes, but it is interesting that they don't show up in this one. I mean, one of them could have played that drunk in the bar.
Look at them tits. Both of them. I seen tits and I seen tits from Portugal to Yokohama. Now let me tell you, Those are tits with a capital T.
Those are some good old Wisconsinites.
Yeah.
If this isn't about Ed Gein, you set it in a place where there's snow. That's the other thing about this movie that I do like is how really on the nose the setting is. Like it just works so well for the story. If you're leaning into the Ed Gein story, that makes perfect sense because Ed Gein, Wisconsin. Again, just setting it here, Roberts Blossom just looks like a weird Midwesterner guy, like weird old Midwestern dude. Roberts Blossom's perfectly cast in this movie.
Yeah.
He plays the weirdos way too well. Way too well.
What did I read that Christopher Walken was up for this role or he wanted the role?
And Harvey Keitel, I believe, was another person.
Jeez.
Good Lord.
They
Can you
just
imagine
seem
that movie?
way too young for this role. I think Roberts Blossom at 50 looking like he's 70, much better.
I think also if Christopher Walken or Harvey Keitel had been in this movie, I don't think they'd have the career that they do now. It's a hell of a movie to make. Like, Roberts Blossom's dissecting a woman's corpse and scooping her fucking brain out. Like, I'm sorry. You know, a lot of people, that's kind of like, oh, okay, you're the guy who's scooping the brain out in that movie, huh? Not in Home Alone. Let's just put it that way. But there you go. Roberts Blossom turned it around.
Would have been a better movie. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Joe Pesci just starts scooping Daniel Stern's brains out. We're the wet bandits. God. I will tell you, though, like, Roberts Blossom is definitely someone that I'm going to be watching more of their stuff on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Because this movie's great. This is a fantastic one.
I really recommend that you check out Christine. He is fucking fantastic in that. He doesn't have a huge part, but then again, he doesn't really have a huge part in most things that he's in. But he is really good in that. And then that's got, you know, my boy Keith Gordon in there just doing it up. It's such a good adaptation of Stephen King.
I've never seen it. I've seen Keith Gordon in Dress to Kill.
Yeah.
So I've never seen Christine because it's about a killer car, right?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. I mean, I have some nostalgia. It was the first Stephen King and first John Carpenter movie I saw in a theater. It's a solid movie.
Did I hear that we might be talking about Citizens Band, or did we decide?
Yes. No,
in February.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go.
I'm curious to see how big his role is in that, because I think if you added up every other role of every other movie that he's been in, it wouldn't amount to the amount of time that he's in this one.
Yeah.
I mean, he is pretty much in every scene, except maybe the narrator's scenes.
I love movies like this that give character actors the reins and just say, fucking do it.
Yeah.
Do the thing that you're so good at. When you have the right character actor, really can capture some magic. I intrinsically believe Roberts Blossom is a monster in this film. That's because of his performance. It's not because of the writing or anything else. He's just such a good weirdo actor that when he's asked to be the weirdo in the entire movie, he's like, yeah, I'm going to do it.
You definitely buy that he is this oddball character, and part of it is that laugh that he does.
Oh, yeah.
And especially that final shot, that is just absolutely chilling. As soon as he starts to stalk the waitress, the movie takes a turn. I mean, even the score changes. I don't want to say the cinematography, but we're dealing with nighttime usually now. And even though the narrator will break in still, we're not getting that gallows humor really anymore. The movie knows, okay, it's time to kind of stop goofing around because this is serious and people really did die. That's where we're headed. I really picked up on that yesterday when I was watching it. I could just feel the difference. Even though I knew what was coming, I just, with the music and everything else, thought, oh boy, okay, this is where, at my age now, where this movie becomes really, really disturbing and not all that fun to watch.
It takes a real hard turn when he decides to just kidnap a woman back to his house.
With a very Ted Bundy move, that whole make her car disabled and then, oh, I'm just here to help. I'm a super helpful guy. Come on, let me give you a ride.
Both of my arms are broken. Can you help me load the sofa into my truck, please? The 70s were a wild time when people would believe that shit. Because, good Lord, you would not get somebody to help you load a sofa into your truck in 2021.
No.
If you had broken arms, I assume you're a serial killer.
Thank you, James Gum.
I do like, though, that she's guarded. She, again, has been not put off, and not really fooled either, because he is just a goofy old man. She sees him as that. Once he drives past the gas station or the turn, this is all Zodiac stuff, too, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Or a supposed Zodiac. She becomes alert and guarded at that point. It's really interesting when she gets out of the truck to go look for him finally after he has gone into his house to get the spare tire. She pauses at the gate, and I got goosebumps watching that yesterday. And then we switched to her point of view, and I'm like, oh man, this is just we're getting into creep factor to the extreme here. I like that character isn't just the screaming, flustered woman. She attempts to escape. She attempts to manipulate him. You don't see that a lot in low-budget horror. You just see the screaming woman lose her mind, not keep her wits about her, and get taken out. With that, and even with the other girl, the girl from the hardware store, she is also given that, I don't want to say agency, but they're not just hapless victims, which brings you back to, this stuff really happened, and it was horrific for these people. You get that feel without being completely bowled over by it. Or maybe you do get bowled over by it.
I just wanted to call out one of the final shots of the film. You mentioned the final stuff, but when the sheriff and the other guys are running towards the house and they switch to slow motion, I really appreciate just how well timed the camera moves are there, especially when they pass in front of one window. We see them through a window, and then we see them pass by another window. So the camera starts to pan, and then we see them caught in a window, and then the camera pans some more to the door, and that's when the door opens. It's really well timed. And then I thought it was very smart to switch that over into slow motion. I think it was like post slow motion. It wasn't shot that way, but I thought it was really smart to do that to amp up that tension. Like, is he going to get caught? Is something going to happen? And just how well it was timed with when the sheriff was passing by those windows and when we got to that door.
I love the ending narration too. Oh my God. They burned the Cobb farm to the ground. I mean, it's such cornball shit, but it's cornball in the context of this movie. It works because, again, I don't know how serious to take this movie because I don't think this movie wants me to take it seriously. I think it does, but it doesn't, and I walk away from this movie thinking it doesn't want me to more than it does, if that makes sense. Especially with the ground. That's so corny. I love it, but it's very corny.
It's hard not to take it seriously once we get to the kidnapping and killings, but it is an interesting confluence of that dark humor and grim story. That can work for some people. For other people, that is not something they want to get into. And I could totally understand that. This is something that I would hesitantly recommend to people. I think it's an interesting film. I think it's interesting to look at in the scope of the other Ormsby and Clark films, but can be overbearing.
Is it any worse than Texas Chainsaw, though? Like, realistically?
I watched Texas Chainsaw the other day to be able to compare the two in my head. It has that same effect on me, and we have humor in that as well. Very dark humor, the whole bit with Grandpa and just those characters. I don't think it's as overwhelming as Texas Chainsaw. And regardless of what you see on the screen, I mean, it's a bloodless movie. They don't really show anything. It's all in your head. And it's like, getting in your head like that is what is disconcerting to me usually in a movie. It doesn't have anything to do with the gore. Deranged probably has more gore than Texas Chainsaw.
Definitely.
That is overwhelming as well.
I think this is a more fun movie. You could put this movie on with your pals and sit and have a good time watching it. It is over the top. This is a movie that, like you said, Mark, you should suggest it to certain people, but certain people are really going to get a kick out of it. It is a fun movie. Ultimately, it is a You know, I kept reading about it's a cult film. It's been rediscovered. And, like, it does deserve more attention. It really does. There's no reason. There's nothing inherently in this movie where I walk away from, like, I don't think more people shouldn't see this. Like, this is one of these movies where I'm like, I think more people should see this. And I think a lot more people would like Robert's Blossom. And I think a lot more people would appreciate this movie a lot more than they do even something like Texas Chainsaw. I think this has more going on for it than Texas Chainsaw does in a lot of ways. I think this movie has more questions that it asks and more things that it talks about that I find more inherently interesting. Texas Chainsaw is a good movie for what it is, but I think this is a more interesting movie at its core.
Unfortunately, there's not a Deranged 2, which is as batshit crazy as Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Or Texas, is it 3? Is 3 the one with Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey, which is also insane?
I never made it that far. I stopped with 2 just because when you reach perfection, you don't have to go on from there.
Dennis Hopper using a chainsaw to fight someone is just, why? There's nothing else that needs to be said, frankly.
Jesus, I love that movie.
That fucking Breakfast Club poster alone is perfection.
It's all in the meat.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So good.
Yeah, why are we talking about that movie, Mark? We're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
We'll take a quick break and I'll play the second part of the 3-part interview with Simon Fitzjohn, author of I'm Going to Kill You, a book on the films of Bob Clark. And Mike, Chris, and I will be back after that.
She's the girl of my dreams, and her fair face beams. She's the sweetheart of Sigma Chi.
Quickly after Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Ormsby and Clark team up again for Death Dream. That wouldn't see the light of day for a little bit. Deranged actually came out next. It's kind of like Abbey Road and Let It Be, where Let It Be was recorded prior to Abbey Road, but Abbey Road came out prior to Let It Be. So it's sort of that thing. This is their late Beatles stage, I guess. What is part of the reason for Deranged coming out before Death Dream?
Bizarrely, there was this huge gap between Death Dream being filmed, but it actually getting released. It seems strange to me because I know you appreciate Death Dream as a film. I think it's an absolute gem of a sort of horror film on so many levels. It had a much bigger budget. It had recognized actors in it, but for whatever reason, they struggled to get distribution. So although Death Dream was filmed in autumn 72, it didn't actually get released until August 74. So you're talking the best part of 2 years after it actually was made, because they had to do reshoots on Death Dream as well, which was unusual for Bob. You know, usually they didn't have time or the money for reshoots. But because Quadrant, who liked children, and so said, right, well, we'll bankroll you to make another film, and we'll give you $235,000 was the budget for Death Dream, they had a bit more of a say in it. There was more interference, is a simple way of putting it, on Death Dream, that there was more people they had to answer to, and there were reshoots. Actually, Bob was editing the final version of Death Dream on the set of Deranged. Deranged was filmed late 73, and it pretty much was filmed and released instantly. I think it was February 74 that Deranged was released, and it had an unbelievably limited release. From my personal understanding of it is I think one of the reasons was in their wisdom, they decided to tack on a subtitle to the film. I don't know if you're aware of the subtitle. You might ring a bell when I say it, but they subtitled it Deranged, Confessions of a Necrophiliac.
That's how it's presented here on streaming with that title.
So I think when they were suddenly going to drive-ins and movie theaters and saying, look, we've got this film. Are you interested in showing it? What is it? Confessions of a Necrophiliac. It was a bit of a hard sell for them. So I think that's why it practically came and went in February 74 with very little in the way of release. It didn't tour the country. It was, in fact, completely forgotten about until years later that somebody found the negative somewhere and then said, what's this? Hang on. And then they were like, yeah, we've sort of buried that film. And somebody watched it and said, why on earth have you buried this? It's incredible. It's very powerful and incredibly effective at what it does. And then it got, again, the whole re-release treatment and reappraised and reappreciated, or appreciated for the first time probably. But the other thing was with Deranged was they were dealing with a different money man. So with Deranged, it was this guy called Tom Carr. He was a concert promoter. He worked with like Led Zeppelin, bands like that. So he was quite high up in the music industry. But for whatever reason, he fancied making a film, a quick film on the side, just to say he'd done it. He'd seen Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and was another person that loved it, met with Bob and Alan and Jeff Gillen, and basically said, right, I want to make a horror film. I've got 200 grand that you can have tomorrow. What can you make? But you've got to do it quick. Tom Carr threw in Ed Gein as well he liked Ed Gein, maybe likes the wrong word, but had an interest in Ed Gein. And so Alan Ormsby basically said, right, okay, well, I'll write a script that, other than literally calling the character Ed Gein, is about Ed Gein. Ezra Cobb is his name in the film, isn't it? Robert's Blossom. But it's Ed Gein, the tyrannical mother. It's the killing a couple of people in the local store. It's the corpses. It's the furniture. It's everything we know about Ed Gein written into a story that's not called Ed Gein. The original plan was Alan Ormsby wrote it and would do special effects on it alongside Tom Savini, who I'll probably mention a bit later on when we go to talk about DEATHDREAM. But the original plan was Bob Clark was going to direct it. They were making this in Canada. Quadrant, who had bankrolled DEATHDREAM, were a Canadian company. And so they asked Bob to go and edit DEATHDREAM in Canada. They wanted him to work in Canada. So hence then Deranged ends up being filmed in Canada at this place called Oshawa, which is about 60 miles from Toronto. And it was filmed in late 73, so cold, stripped down sort of set. But Bob very quickly, I think, realized, looking at this script and looking what this content is going to be like, brains being scooped out of craniums and sort of stuff like that they eventually ended up with, didn't they? That he's like, I'm not actually sure I want to direct this. This is a bit too much for me, too heavy in terms of its content, because it was certainly not played for laughs. There is a lot of black humor in it, but it's not comedy. Bob said, right, I tell you what, I'll produce it instead. And Alan Ormsby and Jeff Gillen, you co-direct it. So that's what happened. So Ormsby and Gillen ended up co-directing it. Bob Clark was there. He was editing DEATHDREAM in a little house on the set. And they were cracking on with filming Deranged in late 73. And then again, when Bob was seeing the rushes, he stepped back even further and said, actually, do you know what? This effects stuff you're doing here, Tom Savini and Dr. is just so effective. I don't even want my name on this at all. So he said, I will stay on and help, but I'm not going to be listed as a producer on this. Because I think for Bob, Alan was just throwing himself into this and having fun. But I think for Bob, he always had an eye on the career as a filmmaker, the long-term element. Well, what am I going to do after this? And suddenly, if I've got my name all over this film called Confessions of a Necrophiliac, and it's a bloodbath, where do I go from here? Who's going to hire me after this? I don't agree with that. And I'm sure you don't, Mark, as well. Being a horror fan, I think Bob got that wrong. And to be fair, years later, he admitted he got it wrong and said, when you actually step back and look at it, it's a very, very powerful film. He was wrong to sort of disown it. Maybe disown is not the right, because he stayed on board, he helped. Right. But he just said, look, I just don't want my name on this, rather than going out and publicly saying, I hated this. He never did that. Right. He sort of said, right, just don't have my name on this. As I said to you before we went on the air, Bob's quote was, I'm a film director who's made some horror films. I am not a horror film director. He never badmouthed the horror genre, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all for him.
We still get that kind of stuff today, people separating themselves from their early horror films.
Yeah, absolutely. Or we get phrases like elevated horror being thrown
or thriller.
You get these
just call it a thriller.
And certainly for low-budget filmmakers, it's an opportunity they wouldn't have otherwise to get into filmmaking, make a quick horror film. They're cheap to make a lot of the time. Bob said the same. He said, when he wanted to become a director, he said he basically had two options because he had no money. It was horror films or porno. Right. And he said he wasn't interested in porno at all. So it's like, right, horror it is then, especially in terms of profit margins and stuff. Well, you think of the most profitable films in history. What are we talking? Blair Witch Project, the original Halloween, these independent films that made an absolute killing. Paranormal Activity, all these films that cost nothing and just absolutely lit up the box office. That didn't happen with Deranged, though. As I say, it pretty much got made and then instantly forgotten about. Limited release at a few drive-ins in February 1974. Roberts Blossom, the actor who played Ezra Cobb, who most people will think of as, I can't remember what his character name is, but he's in Home Alone, isn't he? As the quote-unquote creepy neighbor. So he didn't put it on his CV. He took his name off the film. Again, I think it's very good at what it does. It's not a film I watch over and over again because it's almost too intense in a sort of way. There's no pleasure, if you like. It's incredibly effective and you admire it, but it's not a film I love, if that makes sense.
It definitely is different in tone than the other two movies that we're talking about. And not that those two movies have the same tone, because one is very serious and one is very funny, but this has that absolutely midnight black humor of it, and it can be overwhelming. I think it's pretty amazing, but like you said, it's not one that I watch over and over again.
It's almost got that documentary style as well, hasn't it? Right. You have like the journalist there,
Yes, Les Carlson makes his first appearance.
Yeah, who then turns up in Black Christmas as like the telephone engineer running around the, what do you call them? I don't know what you call that.
Phone bank?
Yeah, the phone bank, plugging his wires in and sort of telling them that it's inside the house. It's played for real, very grimy. It's about as far removed from a Hollywood horror film as you could possibly get. It's downbeat. I think I read somewhere, Stephen Thrower, who's like one of these experts on independent cinema and sort of stuff, wrote that like you just couldn't imagine anybody making it today. People just wouldn't bankroll it. Like, well, nobody's going to watch this, so we're not making it. It's one of those things that I often talk about with Bob Clark and Alan is you always talk about these runs of horror movies. Probably John Carpenter is the best, is known as the way you sort of look and say, right, so you went from like Halloween to The Fog to Escape from New York to this to Christie, and it's like, whoa, that's one hell of a run in terms of like films that you just love. But nobody ever talks about Bob Clark in the early 70s and Alan Ormsby with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and then Death Dream, and then Deranged, then Black Christmas. It's like, hang on a second, that's quite a run as well. Flitting around genres to subgenres to an extent, but Deranged didn't get forgotten about because it is a very, very powerful film. You have to be in the right mood to watch it, I would sort of say.
Mary. At 83 minutes, like both of you said, and I really felt this yesterday when I watched it, it's still a tad long. I don't think any of these Ormsby Clark films are longer than 90 minutes, and this is the shortest. That middle section with Maureen Selby is, I think, where we could have used some trimming up. Was we have two scenes with her, and what they were going for, I believe, could have been accomplished in one scene. That's where we get some more of that black humor. The acting in this, again, for low budget, I love the neighbor guy. He did some acting. He wasn't prolific or anything. Marion Waldman, I know, was in Black Christmas and a few other Bob Clark films, I believe, but I don't think she lived very long. Again, not prolific, but they're all good. Roberts Blossom being the standout. But that I noticed, I'm like, he's going to go back. This isn't just all one. I remembered it all as one scene, and I thought, yeah, this could be trimmed. We didn't need both parts of this. Even though both scenes are pretty funny, it's really that second one where we learn that you can't trust the big girls because all she wants is Ezra's peen.
We barely even mentioned the whole woman psychic thing that he just fucking kills her.
She mistakes his gun for his penis. I was like, okay.
All right. Well, this is your funeral, I guess.
I had never caught that before. I didn't catch her dialogue before.
There you are, darling. There you are.
And I'm like, oh. Right. And then he pulls out his gun. Yeah, I believe that's part that is not true to the story as far as confirmed victims of Ezra Cobb, as far as I know.
Mark meant to say Ed Gein.
It does make Ezra turn a corner and start thinking about wanting the company of women.
Including all the dead women. The thing at the table was a little Texas Chainsaw too. Where they do the same shot like in Texas Chainsaw?
It's very similar, and this came out about 8 or 9 months prior to Texas Chainsaw, and I really don't think there's any way that either person could have known about the other person's film. One was being shot up in Canada, one was being shot in Texas. I noticed that this time, since I watched them so close together, we have that tableau of the dinner scene, and with body parts forming in different ways in each. But again, that goes to, I liked how she got out of that and started throwing the bodies and tricked Ezra a little bit. And it's one of those times now, especially when I watch a movie and go, God, I wish I could change the outcome of this. I know it's going to happen the same way it always happens, but I want this woman to get out of there.
So she gets beaten to death with a goddamn femur bone.
Yeah.
There you go. This is a great movie, though, Mark. I'm really glad you introduced us to this movie.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I started to kind of talk about her going into the house, but when she finally gets in there and discovers another tableau of characters, that scene is unnerving when she realizes, oh, that's him sitting over there.
Yeah.
The first time I watched it, I had the same realization. Oh, shit, he's over there in a skin mask getting ready to spin the wheel on that Victrola. Ugh.
I love that skin mask, too. It's just, it has a cool look. I mean, again, the look of this movie, there are some stylistic stuff. I mean, this is one of those things. And that mask and the way that it looks is just so fucking creepy and just unnerving and unsettling. There's a lot in this movie that is upsetting. And the setting of his house, once it kind of starts falling apart, is one of them. But that skin mask is also pretty great.
Yeah, those are the times where it's like, oh, Tom Savini worked on this. That's pretty good.
I think he was responsible for most of the corpses. As we've mentioned, Ormsby does makeup work as well, and I don't know what the delineation is here on the job duties, like what he took care of as opposed to Savini. The whole thing with the head, the eyeball, and the brains, to me, smacks of Tom Savini. I'm curious to know what Ormsby contributed, and I'm also kind of curious as to how they split the directing duties. I think I read, or maybe it was in the interview that you did with him, Mike, for FX, where he mentioned that Jeff Gillen was more the technical guy, knew a bit more about cameras and things like that, and he was more the artistic one. And whenever there's co-directors, I'm always curious as to how they split up those duties. And
same.
So I don't know if you remember any of that from talking to him or not.
It's been a few years. No, more than anything, my impression is he was a very pleasant gentleman.
He seems like it.
And I definitely know, his thing when it came to FX was throwing in all the fake titles, but they were fake titles, but they were real titles at the same time. I remember I Dismembered Mama, those kind of things. I'm like, well, that was a real thing. So you could tell somebody behind the project actually knew their shit when it came to kind of crappy horror films.
Which is sort of similar to what he contributed to Popcorn before he got taken off of that. All of the films within the film were his doing. I believe the titles and the shooting of it were things that he worked on. I mean, he's an interesting dude. He's made a lot of interesting movies, written a variety of scripts over the years, and that's why I think it's kind of fascinating to look at these 3 films, especially since they came in such quick succession to each other. See how different they are from each other. I mean, the tone and feel of this is so much different than Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. Maybe the feel is a little more akin to Death Dream, but again, still very different
And I would contend if you don't take this movie super seriously, it is fun to watch too. There's kind of an obvious pivot point. It pivots pretty hard. I still couldn't find the humor in it, but there will be plenty of people that cannot find the humor in, not necrophilia, because again, he doesn't engage in necrophilia, at least we don't see. But it's heavy stuff. I mean, it's heavy. Dismemberment, stuff like that's not necessarily a fucking yuck time, as they would say.
They go pretty hard at the end there with the Sally Mae situation, which again is true to the story and one of the more horrific aspects of his little reign of terror. That's where I kind of think, okay, we didn't really need some of this. I'm sure that the edits that were made to that scene would make it a little bit more palatable. And I guess for me now these days, it's just thinking, okay, this really happened to people. And I start thinking about the real victims, and it's sort of hard to separate that from the movie I'm watching. Even though it is a fictitious film, it is enjoyable to watch. I just always start going back to that real aspect of it, and it brings me down a little bit.
I mean, again, that's why he wouldn't say it's inspired by Ed Gein, because then it is too depressing, and then it's not nearly as entertaining. So, yeah, Alan Ormsby, don't say it's inspired by Ed Gein, even though it so fucking clearly is. There's no way you could deny it, but okay. Like, when you have to balance the two, it's like, yeah, this ain't that much fun, because, yeah, two people actually really died. And Ed Gein was digging up corpses and doing God knows what to them.
I can't even imagine being the family of one of those people who was dug up and just thinking about the things that one of my loved ones, their corpse went through. I mean, it's a corpse, right? It's an empty shell, but still, you knew that corpse in life and you loved that corpse. And now somebody's just fucking around with it. It's like, great, thanks.
But again, I mean, the movie does enough to kind of keep your mind off of the fact of that, because again, it's pretty awful if all you're thinking about is, like you said, Mike, defiling of corpses that were people's loved ones. Like, right. Jesus Christ. No, there was only the bodies of the homeless, the people that no one cared about. Okay, movie.
I don't think about that stuff when I'm watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's so far out there, or even Psycho, Silence of the Lambs. You know, this is all about an investigation. Trying to think of some of the other films. You mentioned 3 on a Meat Hook, Mike, and I tried to watch that a few years back and just could not get through it. Mm-hmm. That supposedly has Gein-esque touches in it.
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer has the same problems that this movie does, as far as I'm concerned.
Bill Moseley plays a Gein-esque character in his Rob Zombie films, House of a Thousand Corpses, and
that's the only Rob Zombie film, I should say, that I've seen that I liked was House of a Thousand. Oh wait, no, I take it back. I hated House of a Thousand Corpses. What was the one after that?
Devil's Rejects.
That's the only one I liked. So I apologize. Didn't mean to get your hopes up.
And I think he's in that one as well as the same Gein inspired.
He's in all 3 as the same character.
What's the third one, Chris?
3 from Hell? Man, Rob Zombie, right?
Yeah. I didn't see 31 because I was really pissed off when I found out it wasn't a Baskin and Robbins biopic.
Wow. I mean, look, the thing I love about Rob Zombie is the fact that he does what this movie does, to bring it back to this movie. He gives character actors, I mean, no one's going to fucking cast Bill Moseley and Sid Haig as the leads in anything. Mm-hmm. But Rob Zombie will, and that's kind of awesome. And like Richard Brake and Ken Foray and William Forsythe, his wife, over and over again.
Don't you complain about Sherry Moon Zombie. You're so sexist for hating that.
I don't even care about her either way. She's just in everything. It's a little on the nose that she's in everything.
She's his muse. You didn't complain about De Niro being in all those Scorsese films.
I would complain about DiCaprio being in all those fucking Scorsese movies. How's that? Does that count?
Yeah, a little miscast sometimes there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Howard Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
With Deranged, like with Rob Zombie's movies. I love when character actors are given the opportunity to really take the reign. Sid Haig and Bill Moseley getting to star in a movie as the leads is never bad.
Mike, what will be happening on the projection booth in November?
Well, Mark, as you know, November around here is No Nut November. So we are showing some of the sexiest movies you've ever seen just to give you cinematic blue balls. You're going to see Crimes of Passion, Ken Russell's Whore, so many good things. So no nut. Keep your hands off, be the master of your own domain, and come on by the projection booth at www.projectionboothpodcast.com.
And and Chris, what is going on at the Culture Cast?
What the fuck do I even say to follow that, man? First off, I'd like to point something out to you. If anyone goes to No Nut November at the projection booth, you don't want to watch horror, even if Mike does talk about it. So don't. What is the line in that movie? The famous line, "Fuck you up your ass," or some nonsense.
I haven't seen it since I saw it at the movie theater.
I haven't seen it in 30 years.
As for me, culturecast.com. Mike and I talk together on there. Mark and I talk together on there.
How come Mike and Mark don't talk to each other on there? Sans Chris. What's up with that? Why don't we get our own?
Yeah, just take over the show.
Yeah, you guys do the Culture Cast. I'm going home. But that's where you can find my stuff, cstachiw.com. That's where all the things that I've worked on in the past, including podcasts with Mike and Mark, are.
And you can find me at wakeupheavy.com. And the show is streaming on every podcast platform, I would assume. If you're listening to it, you know where to find it. And I want to thank Mike and Chris for being on this episode, and to everyone for listening. And don't forget,
anything can happen when you wake up heavy.
Mary.
Are you a film fan who loves the ultimate home video experience? Look no further than The Disconnected. Your host, Ryan Verrill, is your go-to source for the latest and most accurate information on home video releases, exclusive interviews with industry insiders and filmmakers, and has established a thriving community where every film and physical media enthusiast feels welcome. From hidden gems to blockbuster hits, The Disconnected brings you insider knowledge and a welcoming space to share your love of cinema. Watch every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific for the live announcements show, and follow The Disconnected on social media to stay updated. Subscribe to The Disconnected on YouTube or on the podcast provider of your choice, and dive into a world where every movie night is an adventure.